Okay, Wasteland, it's a pretty big thing, so we gotta get started on it. Let's talk about research paper first. So plannings, I did all those last night. There are some research papers on there, not very many. Today after class, I think I'll need to go through and actually changing that idea. So what I'm doing after class today is I'm going to get the video edited and stuff, and then I have to work on getting the final exam together. Because my wife and I have an appointment on Wednesday, so I have to leave earlier that day, so I can't do the final exam stuff and get the review ready then. So I'll probably be doing that today. Probably in the evening time, you'll see, like, if you didn't have something right with your sources, those who've submitted the research papers so far, you'll see probably by this evening whether there's something wrong with it.
Oh my god.
Any questions about the research paper or the planning or anything so far? We have, this is today, the 5th. Exam day is this day. So people who turned in their planning on Tuesday got theirs graded. Like Tuesday of last week got theirs graded Wednesday. People who turned it in on Wednesday got it graded Wednesday. People who turned it in on Thursday did not get it graded until Sunday. That variable could be exactly the same for this coming week. So if you get a planning into me this day or this day, it might be graded in a research paper as well. But I'm probably not going to be doing any grading on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So you may not even see any grading start to happen until August 11th if you turn some stuff in over this weekend. And then there's not a whole lot of time between then and the exam day. Presentations are on the 12th. Exam day is on the 14th. I'd like to have as many people as possible go in the class that day, because the people who are gone for sports can't go until this day. Okay. And you'll probably know who the responsible people are among you who probably have stuff turned in. You know, you'll probably just know that about each other. If not, there might be a surprise coup when it comes to class rank. Huh? Like, what? That person? I'm still to this day flabbergasted by who got salutatorian of our class. Valedictorian was not a shock, but salutatorian was like, really, that person? Huh? I think it was a social victory, if I had to guess. Huh?
The first or the second?
The salutatorian. Could somebody turn their phone off and it's like, just tell them to stop calling, or like, I don't know whose is vibrating constantly, but make it stop. What? That doesn't make any sense. It sounds like it's coming from right there. Wait, is it my phone? Oh no. Okay. I thought it sounds like it's right there to me, but I'm also against the wall. So let's see. Today we're not even going to talk about Love Song and Job for Proof because there's no time, but you're still responsible for having read it. Wait, let me see. Let me trace it. Yeah, that's this way. Is there something in your bag? Or somebody's bag? Huh?
I don't have anything.
Behind the cover.
I don't know. I'll just have to keep going with it. Because not me, because mine wasn't vibrating.
I know what it is.
Jay.
It's your phone. I was like, what?
That's okay. We'll just stay about 4 or 5 minutes over. Make up for the difference. Huh? I will be. Want to hear some answers. Let's see. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I've been clear, if you saw this on the midterm, if it was clear on the midterm, but some of the stuff that's on the midterm and some of the stuff that will be on the final, you can't get from reading the poem. You can't get from studying the poem online. You can only get from listening to me talk. So hopefully you've noticed some of that stuff, because like there's times I've literally like said the answer to the question out loud, and then I later wrote the question based on the fact that I remembered saying it. I was like, oh, I said this, and I went and looked and confirmed in the video. Yep, I said it, and then I made the question. The evil time I did that was when I did that Homer's Odyssey and the Eliot thing, and I intentionally said the wrong answers too. But so that way you had to like literally not just hear what I was saying, but actually be paying attention and know what was said. Ha ha ha. So the Wasteland, I'm gonna go ahead and get my book out, and I'll probably be looking along with my book, but we'll also be I'll have it up on the screen. It's just not going to be very useful. Do keep in mind, Wastelands today, bunch of little poems next time. The very next week is going to be presentations on Monday, August 12th. So be prepared for that. Also, I want you to keep in mind that the technical due date for the research paper was this past Sunday. I'm not going to be putting a whole lot of super effort into grading things that are turned in late. They'll get graded when they get graded.
So I'll
Huh?
leave everything else.
I gladly grade a paper on Tuesday if you turn it in that day. But nobody will. Let's see, Wasteland. So we got to talk about Wasteland because it's very hard. I think it's important to note a couple of things that are in Eliot's biography in the book, and a couple of things that are in the Wasteland intro. Because while this, I'm not going to be able to talk about that. I mean, I've been reading this poem for 10-ish years, twice a year. I still don't really get it. Like, I kind of understand bits and pieces. It's more like, it's like if you've, it's like seeing a collection of paintings, I guess, and you kind of understand more about it the more you look at it, but you don't really fully get it. I mean, they're like a cubism painting, maybe even like Picasso or something, or like a Salvador Dali painting with like the clocks melting. Have y'all seen that? Where like the,
By saying that,
hopefully everybody's seen this painting, clocks. I don't even know what the painting is called, or would say clocks melting. It's trying to sell me something. Persistence of memory. You've seen this poem before where it's like painting, whatever. Why do I have to click 40 times just to see? Like, I see like a clock with some ants on it, and a clock melting off a table, and another clock hanging out to dry, I think, on a tree branch. There's some ocean over there, and then there's like a flat line, I guess, that keeps part of it back for some reason. And then I don't even know, I've struggled with whether that's like a manatee that's dehydrated,
that looks like a
an
sock.
eyeball, I don't really know. Like a sock. I mean, you look at it different ways. It could be something different depending on what you're seeing. I think a lot of the Wasteland is intended to sort of wash over you like that. It's important to know that Eliot did not originally publish this, or want to, with footnotes of any kind. He wanted to publish it in its original form with no notes. In fact, even with the foreign stuff, like where it's in a different language, he wanted no notes. He just wanted it to be there. So when you read it, it would just sort of, you'd experience it, and then it would be done. However, the guy who was, like, I don't know if you noticed this. You probably read it online. But if you read it online, you may have missed something at the very beginning that says right after the little, like if I look at the Bartleby version, I don't think it's there. Yeah, it's not there. So it's got like the Latin bit with the Greek, but it's missing this part that says, for Ezra Pound, il miglior fabbro, which is Latin for the better master, I think. Ezra Pound was the guy who helped him edit this poem together, and he cut out something like 220 lines of the poem, like a lot of it, because the poem itself is only how many lines? Like 800 or so? I don't know. No, it's about a third of it. So it's only 433 lines. So he cut out about a third of what was there, or helped him cut that much. And this Ezra Pound guy, when he was helping connect him with a publisher, the publisher saw the copy without the notes and didn't realize how short it was going to be. He was told, oh, this is going to be like the great poem of the age. Like, you want to publish this. And the guy was like, oh, I'm very excited about this. I want to have like a major work in my publication. And he saw it and was like, oh, man, it's so short. Is there anything you could do to like, I don't know, like beef it up or something? Like, and so he provided all these notes that were like references to things that he actually was referencing when he wrote it, but not necessarily something that he expected you to know. He was just sort of taking like the whole of his experience and having that inform upon how it was constructed. I don't think he necessarily thought that we were supposed to. But some people too would come along and say, like, this is a problem that Ulysses had. You ever heard of the novel Ulysses? I think it was actually banned in the UK for a long time, because there was a scene of an old man, like, essentially it was the man's perspective of him going to a beach and like masturbating on the beach while he watched people play, like women wandering in their swimsuits. But so the UK like outlawed it for a while. It was legal in America somehow, as like the Supreme Court helped decide, I think, a case, or like a major court helped decide the case that we would not censure based on lewd content. Like, you could essentially publish what you wanted to publish. It wasn't necessarily pornography, it was written, so it was different. So it was legal in America, but not the UK, and so it was published here, not there, where James Joyce was from. James Joyce wrote The Dead. He also wrote another book called Portrait of the Artist, a Young Man, and then he wrote an even harder work called Ulysses after that. That is like the novel form of The Wasteland. It's kind of like the novel equivalent of The Wasteland, which Eliot read before he wrote this. But Ulysses, they were accusing him of, like, with James Joyce, they said, what you've written makes no sense. There's literally no cohesion to it at all. It's just a bunch of scenes set next to each other that don't relate. And so he published editions with all these notes in them to try to convince people that, no, not only is it cohesive, it's like hyper cohesive. There's all these references that you're just not getting. And so essentially Eliot kind of took, I guess, the notes almost to me and to others like as a joke. Like, you don't even need them. So sometimes he was providing notes for things you didn't even need notes for. And he was like, what would I maybe have been referencing here? Maybe this. But it's not necessarily as cohesive as it may seem to be on the surface. The same is true, I think, of Proof Rock, where that was sort of my interpretation of what was going on, and now I can't see it really any other way, where it's a guy who both wants a girl and to write a great poem. But this, I think, is sort of all over the place in a completely different way. It's just really complex. I don't know if it mentions it here, so I'll mention it separately. Another thing that you need to know about Eliot, I think, to help make sense of this, is he was a huge fan of what were called music halls at the time. You ever heard of music halls? No. It was like, you ever seen like a movie theater that looks really, really nice and it's like very ornate? Looks like it may have been like a place for like dramas to happen, and then they just stuck a screen in there.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very fancy theater. We probably haven't been to one, but we've seen them like in the movies and stuff. It's because those used to be music hall stages that they just sort of converted to cinema, because cinema sort of took it over. People stopped going to music halls and wanted to go to cinemas, and so they just converted the existing spaces. But Eliot loved music hall, and what it sort of worked like was America's Got Talent without the competition, and with a little bit more artistry and less entertainment. So some people would get up there and do like a dramatic monologue. Some people get up, it's almost like a talent show at the school. Some people get up there to do like a dramatic monologue, and some people do like a scene together. Some people get up and do a song and dance. Somebody would get up there and maybe play an instrument. Somebody would maybe do like a comedy act. Somebody would do like parlor tricks, like magic tricks or something. So it'd be like a whole bunch of stuff just shoved together, one after the other, and people got a chance to like do their act. And he loved those. He thought they were great. He loved to show up and see, like, and somebody had to like put the stuff in order, right? Somebody had to say, okay, you go first, then you, then you, then you. And he liked seeing all of those, just, I guess, kind of random assortments of really cool things that sometimes related but sometimes didn't. And I think that really informed upon the way that he wrote poetry. specifically Proof Rock in the Wasteland, because he was like, that's kind of how I want to approach it. I want to have like different scenes that are structured in different ways put next to each other that gives sort of a sense of feeling without really telling you exactly what to think. It's almost like trying to write down A Night on the Town and like get that feeling where it would be like something a little different to everybody, where you'd imagine your night on the town and like what that would be like for you. It would be like somehow it'd be like specific to you and not exactly the thing that he wants you to see. So it's meant to be sort of like an experience more so than here's the definitive meaning of this. But I can point out some things that are being referenced here, and I can help try to make some sense of it, so that it makes a little more sense than maybe it does now. Because I mean, there are things that are being said, at least as it appears on the surface. So it's important to mention those things. Questions so far? There's a lot of things we have to say before we even start saying things. A number of things. Another thing I'm going to mention here is that one side, I've underlined some stuff. I'm just going to kind of mention these different things about Eliot in his biography. One side of Eliot's poetic genius is romantic. His elegiac lamentation over loss and fragmentation, his interest in the evocative and the suggestive. He combines this romantic element, which is sort of like the emphasis on human experience. So you can see that that's important to him, right? Hopefully. You know, much like we have like Wordsworth and Coleridge, and they're sort of writing from a personal place about their personal experience, Keats especially. Eliot sort of has that as well. You can feel it in Proof Rock, where it's a guy connecting with his experience and his emotions. Similar here. The personal experience is very important. But it combines that with a dry, ironic elusiveness. So sometimes you see irony in the way things are happening, like sex with no fertility, or somebody becoming pregnant without the intention of giving birth. The play of wit and satire, and sort of a colloquial element. So there's like human stuff that's happening alongside like high art. So he's got like Dante mixed with a trip to the bar. And he's also got, and this is what makes it so hard, I think, for people, because you're used to seeing things make sense. He had a deliberate elimination of all merely connective and transitional passages, and his buildup of the total pattern of meaning through the immediate juxtaposition of images without overt explanation of what they are doing kind of works like a collage, where you see a bunch of things put next to each other, but they don't necessarily make sense when viewed in just one way. Almost the experience reminds me of, nobody's ever played a game called Loaded Questions before, have you, like a board game? It's kind of, to me, I think of it as like a game of like pre-cards of like Against Humanity. Like, it's like a board game for people to like learn about each other. But there would always be these questions, and you'd have to answer a question. Everybody would answer the question on a piece of paper, pass it to the reader who reads them, and then somebody in the room has to figure out who said what. And that was how you got points, is figuring out who all said what. So every time somebody would read the responses, it was exactly the same. But one time, like, the question was, what is the scariest thing that exists? Or what is the scariest idea you can think of, or scariest thing you can think of? And I thought, I mean, I always wrote silly answers. So what I did this time instead was I drew a smiley face with bat wings for ears and a halo above its head, and it was standing on roller skates. And I just drew that instead of writing something down, and then passed that to the reader. And I knew the reader would always he would chuckle when he saw something funny. So like he read off my answer, and he explained it one way, and then the next time he read it the parts of it in a different order. And my brother said, why was the answer different this time? And I think that, I don't know, to me, that idea, sort of just hearing that said that way, it's sort of like what we're talking about here are different images laid next to each other, rather than one set linear construction that's meant to give us one particular meaning. He takes away all the transitional stuff and doesn't tell us why we're moving on to the next thing, or what it even means that we were there in the first place. Let me see. Okay. And I read this whole bit because it makes sense to me to read it. It says, the wasteland is a series of scenes and images with no author's voice intervening to tell us where we are, but with the implications developed through multiple contrasts and through analogies with older literary works often referred to in a distorted quotation or a half-concealed allusion. Furthermore, the works referred to are not necessarily central in the Western literary tradition, so it's not stuff we're always familiar with. So besides Dante and Shakespeare, which we are familiar with, he sometimes will include a quote from a pre-Socratic philosopher, which not many people know, major and minor 17th century poets and dramatists who we don't know, works of anthropology, history, and philosophy, texts of Buddhism and Hinduism, as you could probably see in the fire sermon at the end. No. What the Thunder said. Even popular songs and vaudeville. So he's got like some, I don't know if you noticed that there was like popular song lyrics at some point, like at least at his time. Ancient and modern voices, high and low art, Western and non-Western languages clash, coincide, jostle alongside one another in a culture where the poet's public might lack a common cultural heritage, a shared knowledge of works of the past. Eliot felt it necessary to accumulate his own body of references, so he just kind of threw in what all he had. In this, his use of earlier literature differs from, say, John Milton's. Both poets are difficult for the modern reader who needs editorial assistance to recognize and understand many of the allusions, but Milton was drawing on a body of knowledge common to educated people in his day. Eliot did not. Nevertheless, this aspect of Eliot can be exaggerated. His imagery and movement of the verse set the tone he requires, establish the area of meaning to be developed so that even the reader ignorant of most of the literary allusions can often get the feel of the poem and achieve some understanding of what it says. Fahrenheit 451, did anybody actually read it when we had the class? Had y'all read it before?
I read it before.
Okay.
No.
So, do y'all remember that scene where, oh my gosh, not Faber, but Montag. Montag brings a book home or whatever, and he reads a poem out loud, and like one of the ladies like hanging out with his wife started crying. She didn't know why. It just made her really sad to hear Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold. She was like, I don't know why I'm sad, I'm just sad. Like, that's kind of how he wanted people to sort of react to this. It's like, you don't know what you're reading, you just feel like it's icky and gross and dark. It makes you sad, and like it's hopeless. Did you all get the sense of hopelessness even if you didn't understand what it meant? It just like feels like hopelessness on paper. Or on computer,
I mean,
whatever you did to read
I read
it.
the first page and I felt hopeless.
You what?
I read the first page and I felt hopeless.
Read the first page and you felt hopeless. That's just probably a lack of understanding. I could always see like when people, I always wish people would read a little further, because you wouldn't believe how many people like write me discussion posts where it's like, wow, it's interesting how it talks of April, and I'm like, yeah, that's like the first few lines. Yay. Yeah, winter kept us warm. Let me see, is there anything else? Oh yeah. So the wasteland part specifically, so that was the Eliot stuff. And the wasteland stuff specifically, when he read Ulysses, he then wrote an essay on Ulysses called Ulysses, Order and Myth. And he declared, Eliot did, that others would follow James Joyce in, and here's a quote from him, in manipulating a continuous parallel between contemporaneity and antiquity, meaning that which is modern and that which calls back to classic literature, specifically like old, like ancient Greek literature and like Dante, like the Italian literature and stuff like that. It is simply a way of controlling, of ordering, of giving a shape and significance to the immense panorama of futility and anarchy which is contemporary history. It is, I seriously believe, a step toward making the modern world possible in art. And Eliot labeled this new technique the mythical method. I think that sort of, I talked to you about Yeats, right? How Yeats was like anticipating something coming, but then after like the nuclear bomb came, people sort of calmed down with that stuff. They were like, where do we go from here? And like talking about what do we do? Because any moment we could all just die, right? Has anybody watched Chernobyl on HBO? I had no idea like the magnitude of badness of Chernobyl. Like they were like, yeah, if we don't like get these 3 guys to go down here and shut off this valve, and by the way, they'll probably die in a week after they go shut this valve off, then we'll have a thermonuclear explosion that renders all of Russia uninhabitable and the entire continent. And I was like, what?
Oh, yeah, they had to like swim that big?
Huh?
That big?
That was what they said on the show. Like there was a lady who they said, oh, this is not that big of a deal, but some physicist who was like 200 kilometers away detected it in the air when they opened the window. They were like, something bad happened somewhere. Because they had like a monitor like just running at all times. So, like, if they hadn't done this thing where, like, they turned off the water, then all the water would be down there and it would cause a thermonuclear explosion that would be, like, multiple times Hiroshima. I think it said, like, 1,000 times Hiroshima or something. In terms of its effect. I can't remember what the times was. It was just big. But he felt like to make the modern world possible, because there's just so much happening. It's like, did y'all know, like, I think that right now, the number of people alive right now is equal to 10% of all the people who have ever lived.
Yeah.
That's how big the population is. That also means that's how many damn things are happening in the world. Like when the Industrial Revolution happened, population just started going, pew! Like, you know, hey, we can keep people alive longer. We have, like, machines and mechanism to make things happen. And, like, we have standardization. We have the nails are all the same size. You know, nobody's out back having to, like, create their own nails for their homes anymore. It's like, so things can get built faster and people can live longer as a result, and scientific advancement and all those things. But we haven't necessarily we've sort of had social progressiveness to a point. Some people think that, you know, homosexuals aren't worth death, right? So, I mean, that's better than it used to be. But at the same time, people haven't even figured out that things like climate change aren't just a profit margin kind of thing. Like, essentially, everybody's arguing, like, there's a hole in the ship, right? Like, there's a hole in the ship. And every year the hole gets, or every day, like, the hole gets bigger. And they're like, yeah, but we really have to concentrate on, like, buying more supplies so that we can make more money when we land on, like, on shores. And so, like, but shouldn't we fix the hole? I mean, the hole can wait. We need to make more money. And so they're like, more money, more money, more money. And then the hole gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the ship starts to sink. And they're like, what the hell? And then somebody's arguing over who's the captain of the sinking ship. You know, everybody's going to die, but they're arguing over, like, how do we make the most money until we do? Like, nobody really realizes that. That's what we're talking. To me, it's almost like when you watch. Has anyone ever seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? Like the old Western movie with, like, your grandparents or something. It's like a movie about, like, a guy who stole some money from another guy. Like, they're trying to get some money, but, like, the whole Civil War is going on in the background, and it's, like, sort of just this backdrop. Like, it almost, like, doesn't matter in the context of the movie. It's just sort of like the background. But you're like, oh, that's actually what really matters. And these guys are worried about, like, a bag of money in a grave somewhere. And that's sort of like it's really weird. Like, people downplay the importance of, but there's so many big things happening that people don't know what to concentrate on. There's just so many things. And I think as a result of that, your generation sort of says, well, there's so many things to think about that if I thought about them all, I'd be depressed. And I'm already depressed. So I might as well just look at silly things all the time and ignore what's actually happening so that I don't have to feel sad all the time.
Yeah, me too.
It's true, isn't it?
Yes.
I see my daughter doing that all the time. It's like, I don't care about politics. You know, she says that, but then, you know, I think she hears about something happening and she goes, well, I don't like that. I was like, well, then you do care about politics. You don't think you do. Politics is just like treating people right, and what do we do with the world in a context. So, anyways, he considered the world to be kind of crazy then. And I mean, we're in an even crazier world now. Interesting weekend. I saw somebody point out. Somebody said it was. Oh gosh, I have to find this real quick. Like, this is. I don't know if Eliot could have, like, anticipated the level of craziness. Come on, Photos app, dude. What the heck? Let me see. Where was that? I could find it, I think, pretty quickly. Give me just a second. It won't take too long. It's a tweet, so it's going to have that. Okay, so Trump tweeted, God bless the people of El Paso, Texas. God bless the people of Dayton, Ohio. And somebody said, we now have mass shootings happening with such frequency that the president can write a 2-for-1 tweet. Like, he didn't tweet fast enough, so now he's got, let me get the other shooting in there too. You know, 2-for-1. So, I mean, if you think about it, though, that's kind of crazy that we have so many mass shootings that, I mean, we've had in 215 days, 251. That's 2 a day. It's a lot of mass shootings. Well, not 2 a day. It's like 1.2 a day, but still bad. More than 1 a day.
It's bad that we even have 1 a day.
Yeah, it's bad that we would have 1 a day. I think the next closest country is like 3
Yeah, it's Mexico.
a year.
I saw the statistics.
But
Mexico had 3 and I think New Zealand.
if I had to blame, I know this sounds like typical old man talk. If I had to blame it on anything, I'd blame it on social media. And when I say social media, I mean like the internet in general. That any crazy person can find some group of people somewhere on the internet that agrees with them. And then it just makes them more and more crazy.
Yeah, it's
Right?
What's it called?
Used to, if somebody said, I think I might go shoot up a Walmart, somebody would say, that sounds stupid. You shouldn't do that. Like, why would you want to do that? Well, because of the illegal immigrants. But that doesn't make any sense. Why? And they would talk to him, and they'd convince them they were stupid, and they wouldn't go through with it. These days, there's just somebody on the internet going, yeah, shoot them. It's the only way to get rid of them. And somebody's like, I guess so.
And then there's Iraq.
Guess I'll buy a whole bunch of firearms,
He was from
spell out Trump with my guns,
Automatic.
and then drive from Dallas to El Paso and shoot a bunch of people. Like, who comes up in their mind and goes, there's a methodical, too, so the guy had a plan. Somebody thought, I'm going to do this. This is a rational plan of events. And I don't think that Eliot could have even anticipated how, like, that kind of level of craziness. Like, he's looking at going, people are being very irresponsible with economics.
I'm just gonna buy them.
People are having sex, not even to have babies. Welcome to 2019, buddy. Like, we got a lot more going on here. We got a little piece of plastic you put up there, everything stops, you know? It's like, forget those pills that make you lose your teeth. Oh, we haven't got to that part yet. I'm sorry. I don't think he could have anticipated the level of craziness. I don't even know if there is a poem. It's like people just went, there's this much crazy. Let's just go back to basics and start writing normal stuff again. Well, for some people, but other people. Let me get back to this, because it does relate. Everything I'm saying relates, but it relates. Hey, I feel like you're losing the way it relates because I'm not connecting them enough. So this is, in terms of its totality, loosely related to the Fisher King myth. Did y'all see that in the beginning, like notes? So there was this, let me see if I can find. So he read this book by Jesse L. Weston called The Grail Legend from Ritual to Romance. So it's talking about the legend of the Holy Grail. So she's talking about ancient vegetation myths and fertility ceremonies. So she traces the relationship of these myths and rituals to Christianity, especially to the legend of the Holy Grail. Y'all have heard of the Holy Grail, right? You go get the Holy Grail and everything's better. So she finds an archetypal fertility myth in the story of the Fisher King, whose death, infirmity, or impotence. So the Fisher King dies or becomes impotent or can't do anything. And that brings drought and desolation to the land and failure of the power to reproduce themselves among both humans and beasts. So nobody can reproduce because the king of fertility is essentially dead. And the symbolic wasteland can be revived only if a questing knight, so somebody who has the power to restore fertility, comes to the Chapel Perilous, answers certain questions about the cup or the grail. Y'all have heard of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where he has to answer those quiz questions and he gets shot off the bridge. What?
I was saying he made a 90 on the quiz.
Oh, yeah. But that wasn't good enough. He died. So the grail and the cup, or the lance, were originally fertility symbols. So the grail, the cup, because of its concavity, because it's like a hole that you put stuff in, it was the female symbol, and the lance, male symbol, because it's stick-like. Now, if you ask these questions in the proper way, it revives the king and restores fertility to the land. Think of a fertility myth in the sense of y'all have all seen Moana, right?
I love that.
So Moana, they take the heart of Te Fiti, right? Think of that as taking the fertility out of the land. And then the fertility's gone, it's sucking the life out of the land, and they have to go restore the heart of Te Fiti. It's like the Fisher King myth again. So they restore the heart of Te Fiti, and that brings fertility back to the land. It's like restoring the heart to the Fisher King or queen in that scenario. So she then restores fertility to everything. Everything's made better. That's just another telling of. So she shows Moana's the questing knight who shows up to fix everything and bring fertility back to the land. That's her goal in the first place, and it's something that she does do. I just used Moana to talk about how to understand the wasteland. So that's essentially the same thing that's happening here in the Fisher King myth. So the relation of this original Grail myth to fertility cults and rituals found in many different civilizations and represented by the stories of a god who dies and is later resurrected shows the common origin and response to the cyclical movement of the seasons, with vegetation dying in winter to be resurrected again in its spring. So fertility had specific relationship again in Christianity and gave its own spiritual meaning to the myth, and did not hesitate to utilize the already existing medium of instruction, but boldly identified the deity of vegetation regarded as life principle with the God of the Christian faith. So God himself ends up becoming the Fisher King. He brings fertility. And that's actually why the fish, you've ever seen Jesus fish?
Yeah.
That's where that comes from, is the fish is a symbol of fertility. That's why that's the God that brings the fertility. So the fish is a life symbol of immemorial antiquity that the title of the fisher has from earliest ages been associated with the deities who were held to be especially connected with the origin and preservation of life. So Eliot thus uses a great variety of myth. This is the important part. Eliot thus uses a great variety of mythological and religious material, both Western and Eastern, to paint a symbolic picture of the modern wasteland and the need for regeneration. He vividly presents the terror of this desiccated life, its loneliness, its emptiness, its irrational apprehensions, as well as its misuse of sexuality. But paradoxically, he ends the poem with sort of like, here's where we can go from here, or like, let's do like a prayer in a sense. And this mass death and social collapse of World War I informed the poem's vision of a wasteland strewn with corpses, wreckage, and ruin. The poem itself was finished in 1922. So World War I was, I think, either just getting underway or had been it was over. It was over, just over. Okay. So very bad times that he had been through. So with all of that said, so it's like how do we restore fertility to the land, and also showing a world that needs fertility restored. Fertility being a loose term here. Fertility being like, how do we restore life to a lifeless landscape, in essence. I think people constantly struggle against that idea. I think that's one of the reasons why I think the pro-life has taken such a resurgence, because people will constantly, I think, fight against these symbols of infertility. When you look at people having abortions, it's essentially like not having children, and that's a symbol to people of infertility, and that I think gets people riled up. I'm sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna read through this, and I'm probably just mostly gonna read it and say a couple of things about it as I go. I'm going to try to go through it quicker than I usually do, because I want to show you something and then also talk about something.
Okay.
I want to talk about essentially what I see as the impacts of this poem. While I think it's a great poem, I don't feel so great about its impacts on art sense. No, that's not true. I feel like it impacted art like film and television and maybe music, other forms of art. I feel like it had a positive impact on. I feel like it's sort of negatively impacted literature, ironically. You got to remind me to talk about that or get to the end quicker. Let's see. So what time is it now? 11, 12? Oh, yeah, we can do this. Totally do this. I'm not going to read it through once and then go back over it again like I did the other time. It's just there's too much. So the very first thing we have here is that Latin epigraph. Nam sibilum quidem cumus ego ipse, I don't know, whatever it says in Latin, and some Greek. And then they responded back in Greek. But what was actually said here? So it says, for once I saw myself with my own eyes, the Sibyl at Cumae hang in a cage. And when the boy said to her, Sibyl, what do you want? She replied, I want to die. Sibyl very famously asked for eternal life, but forgot to ask for eternal youth along with it. And so she lived forever, but her body kept getting older and more decrepit till she was more or less just a slump of body parts hanging in a cage. And they said, oh, Sibyl, what do you want? And she says, I want to die. Because often, if you ask for eternal life, sometimes that it's a decision that you might make with like not a whole lot of thought. You think you want to live forever until you actually do, and then you're like, oh, screw this. This sucks. So if you don't approach, I think it's almost like a metaphor for if you don't approach the world the correct way, if you don't come with the right questions, or if you make assumptions about what you need when you're wrong, like it can have negative effects. Is that right? I don't know. April is the burial of the dead. So there's 5 different parts. The burial of the dead is the name of some Anglican like religious ceremony, burial ceremony, I think. The 5 different parts have different titles that are somewhat represent different sections. I don't even know if those section titles are necessary. They do help provide some structure to what seems an otherwise structureless work, but I don't think that structure is necessarily that important. I mean, it's there, but it just more or less provides you a way to think about chapters. You ever read a book without chapters? Like it's at the length of a book, but it has no chapters. Older novels used to be like that. Like, you have to read like War and Peace, and like, I don't know if War and Peace is an example, but there would be books that didn't have chapter numbers, and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I keep track of this? But then finally you find one that has chapter numbers, even if they're arbitrary, even if they just stick a number on a page that didn't even need to be there. You'd be like, oh, I feel so much better. Because I know that there's an end point. You feel like that when you read a book? You're like, you're really happy when there's a book with short chapters. Because you're like, oh, okay, I can read like 3 chapters and feel smart, But those long chapters are like, yeah, I've got chapters that are like 45 pages long. You're like, screw you, book. I don't have time for you. I can't read an hour and a half, 2 hours before I put it down. I got 5 minutes before I got to go to the next school thing. You better wow me then. So, merely a way to organize things. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. So he's always trying to like subvert expectations. He's doing that a lot. One of the things he's subverting here is April. We think of was what time of the year? Springtime. Spring means
Bounce.
what? You said bounce? Spring. What happens in spring?
Flowers.
Flowers. It's a happy time, right? Easter, happy time, things grow. He's like, no, it's cruel. We had winter. Winter kept us warm. We were inside with family. Now we got to go back outside. He doesn't mention it, but allergies. It sucks. Summer surprised us, coming over the Starnbergersee with a shower of rain. We stopped in the Colonnade, went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten, and drank coffee and talked for an hour. I don't even think this us is the same us we started with.
I don't know.
I think this is like a new us. Because it sounds like a small group of people where before it sounded like everybody. So you're not going to get a consistent speaker out of this, and don't expect to. I think this first part just sets up that you're going to be confused. I think that's the point of it. I understand the other parts more, but this part I've always found especially confusing. It seems like it doesn't even try to like make any sense. So it's like, okay, so we're getting some coffee. And then it says, and drink coffee talk for an hour. Bin gar kan Russen, stam aus Litauen, ek Deutsch. I don't know. I don't even think you're supposed to know, but it technically does have a meaning. It says, I am not Russian at all. I come from Lithuania, a true German. Right, okay, whatever. And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousins, he took me out on a sled, and I was frightened. He said, Marie, Marie, hold on tight. And down we went. In the mountains, there you feel free. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. Okay. So now we have a girl, single girl. Marie. I don't know why I got Marie. Why she's going south in the winter. She's like a bird.
Yeah.
I guess she's a bird. Sure. And then we get this dark sort of thing happening in the background. I feel like there's this happy thing going on where we're like in the mountains. It almost feels like, you ever heard of The Sound of Music, that old movie?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, hills are alive with the sound of... You never heard that? No. Very beautiful landscape. Germany or Switzerland, I think it is. And I think that's what I'm looking at here. But then we have, out of nowhere, it's like... I don't know if have you ever seen anything like this where everything is happy, 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 then it gets super dark. It reminds me of Debbie Downer from Saturday Night Live, but then it I actually saw a puppet sketch one time where it was like a happy puppet and then it was like a sad, angry puppet. But I don't know where that is and I don't know how to find it. It was a Syphil and Ollie show. I don't know. Old. It says, what are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images. Where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock. And I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Okay. Sounds dark. Sounds like we're on, I don't know, the surface of Mars, but it's hot. There's nothing good there. No water. You know, we walk across a landscape and our shadow just goes across like throughout the course of a day. Very much the opposite of, I guess, Wordsworth's Ode to Intimation of Mortality, where like you see your like sun rise with you and it's like your soul's star. No. This is just hot and bad. And then we have Frisch Wetterwind, der Heimat zu, mein irisch Kind, wo willst du? All it means is fresh blows the wind to my homeland, my Irish child, where are you waiting? So there's a German quote about an Irish girl. You gave me hyacinths first a year ago. They called me the hyacinth girl. Yet when we came back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet, I could not speak, and my eyes failed, and I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing. Looking into the heart of light, the silence. Old Undlera des Meer. I don't know, was that waste and empty as the sea? It's just meant to be darkness, like shoved at you, alongside what seems to be happy-go-lucky, I don't know, careless, carefree nature. Then I feel like I'm finally starting to get stuff. I don't get exactly what it means, but I get stuff. He's associating this kind of thing with infertility, with like a bad world. And we have Madame Sesostris, famous clairvoyante, had a bad cold, nevertheless is known to be the wisest woman in Europe, with a wicked pack of cards. Here, said she, is your card. The drowned Phoenician sailor, those are pearls that were his eyes. Look, here is Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations. Here is the man with 3 staves, and here the wheel, and here is the one-eyed merchant, and this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. I do not find the hanged man. Fear death by water. I see crowds of people walking around in a ring. Thank you. If you see dear Mrs. Eckatone, tell I bring the horoscope myself. One must be so careful these days. So we have this weird sort of almost like dramatic monologue about a lady who's reading the cards. What do you call it? Tarot card reader. What do they call it? I can't remember. Fortune teller, right? What do they have somebody in Greenville, I think, that has like an actual office. What do they call it? A mythic, or I don't remember. Mystic. There we go. So like, I think he associates that with like straying from Christian values and sort of like magic and Wicca and bad. So we've strayed from that which, you know, we're supposed to be astrology, that sort of crap. And then he gets back to darkness again after the woman. The book has all these meanings for these different cards. I feel like that's getting aside from the point. I feel like it's wicked, it's bad. That's it. That's all you need to know. Unreal city. Under the brown fog of a winter dawn, a crowd flowed over London Bridge. So many. I had not thought a death had undone so many. Sighs, short and frequent, were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes before his feet. Flowed up the hill and down King William Street to where St. Mary Woolnoth kept the hours with a dead sound in the final stroke of 9. Now, this is interesting because Eliot was not just a poet. He had a full-time job. He worked as a banker in Lloyd's Bank in London. He had a Harvard education, I believe a PhD in literature, but he was super smart. He could speak many languages. And one of the things that he would do at this bank is his main job was to read foreign papers every day and then provide a summary explanation of the way finances and currency issues were working in the world that day. And the bank would then make decisions on investments as a result of what all was happening around the world. So it's kind of like, you know, the slowness of the way, you know, money worked and like inflation and things without computers. But all of these streets are in London, and he worked in the financial district, and he's talking about people almost in a zombie-like state, right? So I think he probably thinks of like the modern time period, who just go to a job and they go home, and they go to a job and they go home, and it seems like work, 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 and nobody really knows what they're doing or cares what they're doing. I mean, your jobs are going to be very similar. In fact, it's getting worse. Did I tell you about the time that I was talking to, I don't know if she wants me to, a nursing instructor, and the nursing instructor was asking me, like, did you see what happened on Facebook? I was like, no. She's like, it's all over Facebook. Have you seen it? I was like, I don't get on Facebook a lot. She's like, well, it's the main story out right now. She says, there was a patient that had Ebola at the Houston hospital. And, you know, you can, as a nurse, talk about, like, situations that you've been in, or, like, you know, you can post on social media. You just can't be specific. Now, the problem is she didn't give any identifying information to this patient. But she said that I was with a patient that had Ebola, and, like, they made some, like, disparaging remarks about the person, too, or gave up the fact that they had Ebola. And, like, you know, like, then she, like, ended up maybe, like, losing her license and stuff because she violated HIPAA. And I was like, oh, no, I haven't heard anything about this. She's like, how have you not heard anything about this? It's everywhere. And I went, well, so you saw this on Facebook, right? She's like, yeah. And I said, and you have a lot of friends who are nurses. Yeah. You're seeing nursing stories. Nobody else sees this. You're the only one. And she's like, what? And I'm like, the algorithms, the way they're built, they're going to show you what all of you and your friends are looking at and the kind of things you would normally like. So me on my Facebook, I'm probably going to see a bunch of English stuff, film stuff, and stuff that mostly aligns with my political beliefs. Regardless of whether I want that to be the case. It's just how it's structured. And the same is going to be true of, like, I think I talked to, well, I don't know if I talked to you about this, but you've heard that stuff happening right now with, they've looked at the Border Patrol and how many of the people in Border Patrol are part of these Facebook groups that say terrible things about, I think one of the things was they said something terrible about that Ocasio-Cortez, like they said like it was a detailed description of her rape and, like, joking, like, tones. And a lot of those people were fired from their positions for doing that. But I think they found that police in the election, the Trump election, like 80% of police voted for Trump. And I can sort of see how that sort of thing would happen. I can see how almost every single person's employment, they're going to get on Facebook, see people who they are working with, and so you're going to essentially see the stuff that's from your place of employment or the kind of job you do reinforced and pointed at you all day long every day, to the point where, like, your viewpoint is sort of set. And there's really nothing you're going to see that's going to go outside that viewpoint. And you actually have to click sometimes an article and actually read it instead of just the title to see what's really there, because it's trying to get you to just like it so you can get ad space. But I think that one of the reasons that happens is because what do police see every day? Police, when they go out on their jobs, that people have distress, they need help, there are bad things happening, they have to go answer that call. So I think essentially what police see every day is what? The worst people in society. All day, every day. Sometimes they, you know, do nice things, but that's like, you know, like sometimes a little, you know, kid is like got a lemonade stand, you get to go say hi, but that's got to be not the norm. Mostly it's, you know, probably two neighbors aren't getting along, one's pissing and moaning about the other, says he won't shut up, and like the cop arrives on the scene, they're just shouting at each other, and he's got to somehow try to, like, calm things down so he can leave and say, yeah, everything is fine. So you just see the worst of society every day, and I think that's going to be like this for every job, where we're more and more compartmentalized. We don't have a sense of a fullness of purpose. We just have a sense of, I go to work to make my money, to come home, to then go back to work and make the money and come home. And I think he had already seen that then, how in the financial district in London, people were going to work to make money and then go home, and they come back to work the next day to make more money and go home. And there's no sense of, like, a full purpose, like I'm doing something great with my life. It's just I'm living to the next day.
Like that SpongeBob episode.
Yeah.
Where Squidward just gets up, plays the clarinet, goes to the store. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah?
And it's the same thing every day? Yeah. SpongeBob, though, is always trying to do something great with his life. Squidward, though, he very much just does wake up every day, goes to work, comes home, and then complains about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he sees that, I think, in the world. Eliot does. So he's talking about this happening in London. And it's just going to get worse the way our current society is structured and the way social media is structured. Although they have found some hope. Apparently Facebook has started saying like the credibility of this article has been called into question on some articles. And people are less likely to share an article if it says the facts of this article have been disputed. And they said people are less likely to share articles that have that notification because you don't want to look like an idiot. Although I subscribe to a subreddit called Ate the Onion. You ever heard of the website The Onion?
Yeah.
Publishes fake news. It's people who see articles from The Onion and think they're real and get pissed.
So is the Onion like?
So even with The Onion, which is obviously fake, people are getting fooled. And it's reinforcing beliefs they already had. It was funny stuff. But it's funny, but also terrifying at the same time. You kind of just have to laugh because otherwise you're just sad all the time. So he says, after we got all these streets in the financial district in London, and Eliot's talking about how everybody sort of seems like zombies there. Like he said, I had not thought death had undone so many, but they're somehow still walking, so they've got to be like in a zombie-like state. Said, there I saw one I knew, and I stopped him crying, Stetson, you who were with me in the ships at Malay. That corpse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year? Or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Oh, keep the dog far hence, that's friend to men. Or with his nails he'll dig it up again. You, hypocrite lecteur, mon semblable, mon frère. Okay. It just the idea that you've planted a corpse in your garden and you hope it might sprout. It's just a weird image. To me, it sounds like something out of a Tim Burton movie. Like just sort of dark and weird. He's setting up this obvious paradox, something that can't happen, just to sort of mess with your mind's ability to imagine it, I guess. And then that's it for the first section. The burial ceremony. That's it. And then we move on to game of chess, which this part's weird. Well, I don't know why I'm saying that. They're all weird. Is this the one with like the weird sex scene? Well, there's two of those. No, this isn't the one with the really weird sex scene. That's the fire sermon, I think, isn't it? Yeah, that's the one with it. So here we have a very opulent, you know what opulent is? Like very rich, like lots and lots of very nice things, like marble stuff and gold and like giant fireplaces with like giant concrete statues or marble statues just in the house. Much like we imagined the place where the Dark Lady lived in, or the intended in Conrad's Heart of Darkness. So it says the chair she sat in, and by the way, the game of chess, it says here there was some play that existed at the time where every scene in a game of chess was matched by a guy trying to seduce a girl, that lady's daughter, in the other room. Somebody thinks that relates. Yeah. The chair she sat in like a burnished throne glowed on the marble where the glass held up by standards wrought with fruited vines from which a golden Cupidon peeped out. Another hid his eyes behind his wings, so rich stuff, angels and statues of things, paintings. Doubled the flames of seven-branched candelabra, reflecting light upon the table as the glitter of her jewels rose to meet it. From satin cases poured in rich profusion, and vials of ivory and colored glass, unstoppered, lurked her strange synthetic perfumes, unguent, powdered or liquid, troubled, confused, and drowned the scents and odors, too many smells. Stirred by the air that freshened from the window, these ascended, and fattening the prolonged candle flames, flung their smoke into the lock area. Stirring the pattern on the coffered ceiling, huge seawood fed with copper burned green and orange, framed by the colored stone, in which sad light a carved dolphin swam. So it's a very rich, like opulent household, and it's such a big fireplace that like there's a giant log of like seawood that's been sitting on the side of the ocean, but it's got copper infused somehow into the wood, so that when you see the fire, you ever burned copper in chem lab or physics in school? When you put copper under a flame, you could actually try this. I mean, I don't suggest it, but if you were to take like copper wiring and then you like take a lighter flame and you like put the copper, it should create cuprous oxide as it burns, and then you would see green flame. So what we have here is an orange and green flame flickering in the giant fireplace. I imagine it would cost a lot for this specialty wood to be able to like get this, and it looked like really cool. So I bet all I've accomplished today is getting people to like go home and they're gonna like pull out a lighter and they're gonna like get some copper wire and be like, good, I've accomplished everything I set out to accomplish with my literature lesson today. They're like, he said something with fire, write that down. Burn things. I'm kidding, y'all are smarter. The change of Philomel by the barbarous king so rudely forced, yet there the nightingale filled all the desert with inviolable voice, and still she cried, and still the world pursues, chuk chuk, to dirty ears. The change of Philomel, this is an important thing to note in the poem. We're trying to understand it in some way, which is Philomela was raped by the barbarous king Tereus, husband of her sister, Procne. So Philomela was raped by her husband's sister. No. Philomela was raped by the king, who was her sister's husband. So he rapes his sister-in-law. Philomela, for whatever reason, was then transformed into a nightingale. So the change of Philomel was that she was raped and then turned into a nightingale and sang a nightingale song. The nightingale is the one that I showed you the video of, where it's like, da, 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 da. So when it says chuk chuk, that kind of sounds like maybe one of the sounds that the bird would have made. So that's, now she's a bird. She can't, I don't know if it's meant to like, where she can't now talk about the fact that she was raped, or it was like a form of like trying to escape the scenario, like a traumatic stress, like, but magical. I don't really know. But that's what happened, and so she goes, chuk chuk. How lovely. And other withered stumps of time were told upon the walls. So that was one of the things that was on the walls, almost like Odin, a Grecian army, is describing what he sees in like the art. Other withered stumps of time were told upon the walls, staring forms leaned out, leaning, hushing the room enclosed. Footsteps shuffled on the stair. Under the firelight, under the brush, her hair spread out in fiery points, glowed into words that would be savagely still. So then we have what seems to be a conversation between two lovers, sort of. It seems like a very serious male and a woman who won't shut up. My nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad. Stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. What are you thinking? What thinking what? I never know what you're thinking. Think. She sounds lovely. I think we are in Rat's Alley where the dead men lost their bones. And he sounds like he's chipper too. He's one. What is that noise? The wind under the door. What is that noise now? What is the wind doing? Nothing again, nothing. Do you know nothing? Do you see nothing? Do you remember nothing? I remember those were pearls that were his eyes. Are you alive or not? Is there nothing in your head? But oh, that Shakespearean rag. It's so elegant, so intelligent. Some song that existed at the time, I think. What shall I do now? What shall I do? I shall rush out as I am and walk the street with my hair down so. What shall we do tomorrow? What shall we ever do? The hot water at 10, and if it rains, a closed car at 4, and we shall play a game of chess, pressing lidless eyes and waiting for a knock upon the door. It just sounds ominous, right? Like they're gonna have like a day. She like seems very like, I don't know, annoying, and he seems like he doesn't care. Both of them seem like they don't care, but just her in like a very chipper way, and him in a not caring way. And they're waiting for something dark that's coming. Then we have another conversation. Now we're in a new conversation. We're at what seems to be a bar, and it's closing time. And then this lady's gossiping about another one. She says, when Lil's husband got demobbed, I said, I didn't mince my words. I said to her myself, hurry up, please, it's time. Now Albert's coming back. Make yourself a bit smart. He'll want to know what you done with that money he gave you to get yourself some teeth. He did. I was there. You have them all out, Lil, and get a nice set. He said, I swear I can't bear to look at you. And no more can I said. And think of poor Albert. He's been in the army 4 years. He wants a good time. And if you don't give it to him, there's others will, I said. Oh, is there? She said. Something to that, I said. Then I don't know who to thank, she said, and give me a straight look. Hurry up, please. It's time. If you don't like it, you can get on with it, I said. Others can pick and choose if you can't. But if Albert makes off, it won't be for lack of telling. You ought to be ashamed, I said, to look so antique, and her only 31. I can't help it, she said, pulling a long face. It's them pills it took to bring it off, she said. She's had 5 already and nearly died of young George. Chemist said it would be all right, but I've never been the same. You are a proper fool, I said. Well, if Albert won't leave you alone, there it is, I said. What you get married for if you don't want children? Hurry up, please, it's time. Well, that Sunday Albert was home. They had a hot gammon, and they asked me into dinner to get the beauty of it hot. Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. Good night, Bill. Good night, Lou. Good night, May. Good night. Ta-ta. Good night, good night. Good night, ladies. Good night, sweet ladies. Good night, good night. So it seems what she's talking about is this lady who has taken, at least what the notes say in the margin, is that there's a woman who, her husband has been off to war. He gave her money to get herself some teeth. The reason she's missing her teeth in the first place is because she took these pills that would cause abortions because she keeps getting pregnant with Albert. But these pills cause abortions, but apparently they'd also mess with your teeth. So her teeth got real bad, and they've fallen out. And she said, well, we gave you money to go get yourself some teeth, and you hadn't done it. What'd you do with the money? And she didn't say. I mean, she very well could be getting more abortion pills because she's been having sex with other guys that aren't Albert. And she had 5 abortion pills already and nearly died of young George, so I guess she named one of the abortions. When she took the pill, named it George and almost killed her. That's one thing people don't remember back in the day is that like abortions and they used to kill you sometimes. It was a high probability. People still got them. They still took the pills. They still had the doctors come and do the shady abortion procedures. Because it doesn't matter if you tell people, you can't have an abortion. Ha-ha. Now all the babies will be born. No. They're just going to get it done in a dangerous way. So now you have both a dead baby and a dead woman. So that's not quite, you can't just stop people from doing it. It's one of those things. And I think that's something that, and go back to this kind of stuff, you can see it. But that's that whole bar scene, okay? Bar scene over. So there's weird things where it's like the relationship between man and woman doesn't seem to be ideal. It seems like there's something wrong with the relationship between men and women in this scene. Despite the fact that there seems to be very opulent scenarios in which people can live. It's very nice. There's a lot of richness to it, but with seemingly no emotional, stability. Everything just seems to be, nobody's relating to each other right anymore. Then we have the fire sermon. So this is where he's sort of talking about an unfertile landscape for a couple minutes, just sort of making us uncomfortable, I think. It says, the river's tent is broken, the last fingers of leaf clutch and sink into the wet bank. The wind crosses the brown land unheard, the nymphs are departed. Sweet Thames runs softly till I end my song, the river bears no empty bottles. Sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends, or other testimony of summer nights. The nymphs are departed. And their friends, the loitering heirs of city directors, departed, have left no addresses. By the waters of Lehman I sat down and leapt. Sweet Thames runs softly till I end my song. Sweet Thames runs softly, for I speak not loud or long. But at my back in a cold blast I hear the rattle of the bones and chuckle spread from ear to ear. I almost think of like the Joker or like It. There's this chuckle spread from ear to ear. That's just, it's weird, like creepy images we're getting right now. And then we get even more creepiness here. A rat, which is, I did not get the Ratatouille vibe. Whoever said that, Jess? Was that you? You say something about Ratatouille?
No.
Who said Ratatouille? Can't remember. Somebody said Ratatouille. They said, reminded me of Ratatouille. And I was like, I didn't get that. I don't remember who. It was a guy. I don't know. Who said it?
I said it was confusing.
Oh, well, everybody said it was confusing. Doesn't really narrow it down for me. But somebody literally mentioned Ratatouille. So that reminded me of Ratatouille. And I was like, really, though? What'd you say?
I don't know.
I think it was probably me.
I was they probably know.
Oh, it might have been. It was me, yeah. Oh, yeah, because his thing was called Fat Rats. I think it was him. He said, a rat crept softly through the vegetation, dragging its slimy belly on the bank when I was fishing in the dull canal on a winter evening around behind the gas house. Or this is like a lifeless landscape he's talking about, fishing. Musing upon the king my brother's wreck and on the king my father's death before him. White bodies naked on the low, damp ground, and bones cast in little low, dry garret rattled by the rat's foot only year to year. It almost sounds like whenever we think of like an apocalyptic scenario where everybody's dead and there's nothing left but bones and just river slime. But at my back from time to time I hear the sound of horns and motors, which shall bring Sweeney to Mrs. Porter in the spring. Oh, the moon shone bright on Mrs. Porter and on her daughter. They washed their feet in soda water. Apparently that was some sort of inappropriate poem at the time. Et aussi, oh, I don't know how to speak French. Et aussi voir des enfants chantant dans le capot. I don't know. It's nothing. Oh wait, we got to go back to the Nightingale sounds. This is a fun part, right? Nightingale sounds. Here we go. So rudely forest. Tyria. Yeah, we're talking about the nightingale that got raped. The raped nightingale. Oh, it sounds weird to say the word rape is raped because it makes the word sound pretty. Isn't that weird? You know what I'm talking about? Like, you know, like words that were like the words that sounds match the way that their meaning make us feel good. Like if you're like the words euphony. Euphony is the word for pretty sounds. The word for bad sounds, the ones that don't sound good to the ear, are cacophony. Cacophony. Like it literally sounds like you're coughing and hacking, the word itself does. And actually, I think if you had to go for like the Latin root, caca, I'm sure one of the first words that you learn in Spanish class when, you know, you're asking like, hey, how do I say the bad things? You know? But anyways, it literally means like cacophony, so it's like phony as sound and caca is poop, so poop sound. Kind of makes sense. But I think to take the word like raped is like a bad sound, but then say raped, it gives it like I don't know, almost like an artistic elevation that I don't think I feel comfortable saying ever again. So here we have the nightingale thing brought back, raped and turned into a nightingale. And it's just like an image we're given. We're like, remember, this one was raped, turned into a nightingale, and she sings her nightingale song. It's like we're not even told like what it means. Just like, here it is again. Don't forget. Unreal city under the brown fog of winter noon, Mr. Eugenides, the Smyrna merchant, unshaven with a pocket full of currants, CIF London, documents at sight, asked me in demotic French to lunch at the Cannon Street Hotel, followed by a weekend at the Metropole. People have think that at the time, because he was, I don't know if he was a strong Christian, he was a member of the Anglican Church, he converted because he was American, then he went to Britain and became a citizen. People think that he's essentially talking about the problem of homosexuality. It's sex without the point of having a child. So to him, he would consider that to be yet another symbol of infertility. So not the progressive sense that we have these days. But I don't know that we can necessarily fault him for that because at the time I think that was still not widely accepted. And then it says, at the violet hour, when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine... Oh, yeah, this is the weird sex scene. With Tiresias, which is very important. At the violet hour, when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine waits like a taxi, throbbing, waiting. I, Tiresias, though blind, throbbing between two lives, old man with wrinkled female breasts, can see at the violet hour, the evening hour that strives homeward and brings the sailor home from sea, the typist home at tea time, clears her breakfast, lights her stove, and lays out food in tins. So have I told y'all before who Tiresias is? He appeared in, what was that? The play, the Greek play. For some reason I can't remember the girl's name that starts with an A. There was Oedipus at Colonus. Antigone, thank you. Oh my gosh. Almost lost my teacher's license or something. What? Yeah, we read Antigone. Tiresias appears in Antigone and in Oedipus, the king. So Tiresias, I think I mentioned this at the time, but I'll re-mention it again, just so we're on page, same page here. So Tiresias, he was a guy who one day saw some snakes having sex, and he said, "Oh, that's gross, stop that." So he smacks them with a stick. He turns into a woman. I don't know why. Lives as a woman for like 7 years, sees some snakes having sex again, goes, "Oh man, please, please, let me smack these snakes again with a stick and hopefully it'll turn me back to a dude." And it does. But he thinks he's going to live like that forever. He thinks he's going to be a woman forever, so he goes ahead and like starts living his life as a woman. 7 years is a long time. How old are you now? 17. That's like back when you were, I don't know, 10. That's a lot of years. And that seems like, that's not that long ago, like now. But like when you're older, you're like 7 years. That was like before, I think it was before I think I'd married my wife at that point. But it's like right when I just got married. And now it's like, I'm like, well, I've been married forever, you know. But so 7 years he lived as a woman. He had plenty of time to like, you know, he had sex and that kind of stuff with men, thinking that was the only life he had from now on. Turned back into a man. So there's two gods arguing over who have more pleasure in sex, men or women. The man god is saying, I think women have more pleasure in sex. The woman god is saying, I think men have more pleasure in sex. So they say, well, how do we settle this? And they go, wait a minute. Isn't there that dude Tiresias down on Earth who's like lived as both a man and a woman and had sex with both? They're like, yes. So they make a bet and they go ask Tiresias and they say, so what do you think, Tiresias? And Tiresias is like, well, I've lived as a man and a woman. And I have to say, I think that women have more pleasure in sex than a man does. The woman didn't like this because she was adamant that it was a man who has more pleasure. So the woman strikes Tiresias blind. Says, screw you for giving this stupid answer. And not being able to reverse what another god does, the male god goes, oh my gosh, okay, you can't see with your real eyes, so I'm going to give you the gift of prophecy. You can see the future, even though you can't see with your physical eyes. So you can see the future in your mind, but you can't see the physical reality with your eyes. So Tiresias has had a pretty turbulent life. All because one day he smacked a couple snakes with a stick. It's almost like Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Remember? It's like, he like, I'm going to kill this albatross. And then like his whole life gets turned upside down. And this guy's like, smack a snake. And all of a sudden like, yeah, I've lived as two women. Now I can see the future, but I can't see my feet. Weird life. So Tiresias becomes a central figure in this because he's had sex from both sides of the aisle, from men and women. And so he's viewing this scenario where the typist is home at tea time, and then a guy comes and visits her. Right? So the typist home at tea time, clears her breakfast, lights her stove, and lays out food in tins. Out of the window, perilously spread her drying combinations, her underwear, touched by the sun's last rays. On the divan are piled at night her bed, stockings, slippers, camisoles, and stays. So the couch is where she actually sleeps at night as well. It's a very small apartment. So at night, she'll just shove all her dirty clothes or clean clothes off the couch, and then she'll sleep on it. It sounds like an actual kid's room. You'll probably live in these sorts of scenarios, right? You know, you have messy rooms, and you shove things aside so you can sit somewhere. So he says, I, Tiresias, old man with wrinkled dugs. He's calling breasts dugs. So weird. It's like the worst word I can think of for breasts. Like it's the least attractive thing I could ever think to call a breast. Like, you know what? Dugs. Blah. It's like, let's just be like calling a flower like a flurg. You know, it's just a frarg. Terrible name for a flower. So he says, I, Tiresias, old man with wrinkled dugs, perceived the scene and foretold the rest. I, too, awaited the expected guest. Who's going to come visit the typist, the female typist at tea time? He, the young man carbuncular, the young man with pimples, arrives. A small house agent's clerk with one bold stare, one of the low on whom assurance sits as a silk hat on a Bradford millionaire. He's one of those people that, like, he's a low human being. Like, he's not, like, got anything to be proud of, but he's very proud. So he just feels assured in his life, like, yes, things will go my way. And he says, the time is now propitious, as he guesses. The meal is ended. She is bored and tired, and he endeavors to engage her in caresses, which still are unreproved, if undesired. Flushed and decided, he assaults at once. Exploring hands encounter no defense. His vanity requires no response, and makes a welcome of indifference. And I, Tiresias, have forsuffered all enacted on the same divan or bed. I, who have sat by Thebes below the wall and walked among the lowest of the dead, bestows one final patronizing kiss and gropes his way, finding the stairs unlit. So basically what happened is he's like, and like, you know, jumps her, and she's like, she's not hating it enough to push him off. She's not liking it enough to even care that she's just indifferent about what's happening. She's just sort of laying there like, and he does his thing. And then he's like, mwah, and then walks out, leaves. He's like, I gotta go. And then she says she turns, looks a moment in the glass, the mirror. Hardly aware of her departed lover, her brain allows one half-formed thought to pass. Well, now that's done. I'm glad it's over. When lovely woman stoops to folly and paces about her room again alone, she smooths her hair with automatic hand. Oh, there we go. Better. And puts a record on the gramophone. So guy walks in, hey, baby, sex. And then she's like, okay, well, that's over. Like almost like sex is like this weird sort of indifferent obligation she has. It's not pleasurable. It's not. So Eliot sees this kind of sex as disgusting. Sex that seemingly has no love, no passion, no purpose. Just like it's like two animals. It's not even like people. And then we switch scenes again. This music crept by me upon the waters and along the strand up Queen Victoria Street. Oh, city, city. I can sometimes hear beside a public bar at Lower Thames Street the pleasant whining of a mandolin and a clatter and a chatter from within where fishmen lounge at noon, where the walls of Magnus Martyr hold inexplicable splendor of Ionian white and gold. And then it gets weirdly like short here, and I almost feel like it comes out rhythmically, like it's like a chant. The river sweats oil and tar, the barges drift with the turning tide, red sails wide. To leeward, swing on the heavy spar, the barges wash, drifting logs down Greenwich Reach past the Isle of Dogs. Wala la leia, wala la leia la la. I don't know, I have no idea. Elizabeth and Leicester beating oars, the stern was formed a gilded shell, red and gold, the brisk swell rippled both shores, southwest wind carried downstream the peal of bells, white towers, wala la leia, wala la leia la la. No idea why it's doing that. It's just it's like an ugly song. Trams and dusty trees, Highbury bore me. Richmond and Kew undid me. By Richmond I raised my knees, supine on the floor of a narrow canoe. Boat sex. My feet are at Moorgate, and my heart under my feet after the event. He wept. He promised a new start. I made no comment. What should I resent? I guess they had sex on a boat now, and he's like, oh, I promise a new start. This is not just a one-off thing. We're gonna be back together. And she's like, it's whatever. Like, you make up your stories. I don't really care. What should I resent? What do I care? On Margate Sands, I can connect nothing with nothing. The broken fingernails of dirty hands. My people, humble people who expect nothing. La la. To Carthage then I came, burning, 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 burning. O Lord, thou pluckest me out. O Lord, thou pluckest burning.
Okay.
I almost feel like it's a record scratching in that last part. Where I feel like I'm getting repetition like for no reason. I see burning, 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 burning. Oh Lord, thou pluckest me. Oh Lord, thou pluckest. Oh, burning. Like it just seems like I don't know. It's weird. Death by water. Remember the lady said fear death by water. So it connects, but why? Phlebas the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, so he's been dead 2 weeks, forgot the cry of gulls and the deep seas swell and the profit and loss. So dead, he no longer has to worry about all that stuff. A current under sea picked his bones and whispers, so it's very silent as his flesh is picked from his bones. As he rose and fell, he passed the stages of his age and youth, entering the whirlpool. Gentile or Jew, O you who turn the wheel and look to windward, consider Phlebas, who was once handsome and tall as you. We're all going to die. We're all going to have all this stuff we do every day that seems so important end. Our bones will be picked clean. How fun. What? Oh, okay. Yet we think everything we do is so important. And the weird thing, too, here is it's death by water. So water, which is supposed to bring fertility, which is supposed to bring life, instead is bringing death. Reminds me of a one time in a Ripley's Believe It or Not, if you ever heard of that before. Like a little book that came out that had weird stuff in it. In this book, it said that there was a shark that died because it got a box stuck in its mouth and couldn't get it out. But it had bit it because it could smell, I guess, fish in the box. But it died choking on a box of fish because it couldn't get to the fish. But it couldn't eat anything after the box was stuck in its mouth. That sounds to me like, he starved from having more fish than he could probably eat in his mouth. Well, not more fish, but probably all those fish. But still, it's an ironic way to die. And so this is ironic here to die of water, which is supposed to bring life. What?
Dying of thirst in the ocean.
Thirsty video? What?
Dying of thirst in the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
Water, but you can't drink the water.
Interestingly, I was reading that the reason that we can't drink ocean water is that the salt requires so much energy by our body to be processed that it actually uses more water than we take in. So you can drink the water in the ocean, but you're actually going to end up using more energy processing that water than you will get nourishment from it. It's ironic. Yeah, it's crazy. But y'all just took biology, so y'all should have knowledge of that, right? So what the thunder said. So finally, we got the water deaths, we have the bad sex, and we're coming upon this landscape. The landscape is here, back to the dry, red, shadowless, hot landscape. There's actually some Christian imagery here, but also was more of this endless landscape that's sad. It says, after the torchlight red on sweaty faces, after the frosty silence in the gardens, after the agony in stony places, the shouting and the crying, prison and place and reverberation of thunder of spring over distant mountains, he who was living is now dead. We who were living are now dying, with a little patience. And then it says, here is no water but only rock. Rock and no water in the sandy road, the road winding above among the mountains, which are mountains of rock without water. If there were water, we should stop and drink. Amongst the rock one cannot stop or think. Sweat is dry and feet are in the sand. If there were only water amongst the rock, dead mountain mouth of carious teeth that cannot spit. Here one can neither stand nor lie nor sit. There is not even silence in the mountains, but dry, sterile thunder without rain. There is not even solitude in the mountains, but red, sullen faces sneer and snarl from doors of mud-cracked houses. If there were water and no rock, if there were rock and also water, and water a spring, a pool among the rock, if there were the sound of water only, not the cicada and dry grass singing, but sound of water over a rock, where the hermit thrush sings in the pine trees, drip, drop, drip, drop, 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 but there is no water. It's just meant to, I think, make us uncomfortable and almost give us anxiety. Is that kind of how you feel? Like it's hot and rocky, and you don't even have silence there. Like you would hope there was at least silence if there was no water, but like it's dry and it's loud and it sounds very hellish. Gives you anxiety just thinking about it. Like, I don't want to be there. Sounds like Arizona. Who is the third who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together. When I look up ahead at the white road, there is always another one walking beside you, gliding wrapped in a brown mantle, hooded. I do not know whether a man or woman, but who is that on the other side of you? I don't know. It says here for some reason there's a reference to like up ahead, like there's some reference to like Jesus, like you look ahead and you see it's Jesus is walking with you, but you just don't realize it. But I don't understand that.
There's a story in the Bible where you like look over and there's feet prints, but it's Jesus or whatever.
Yeah, and that's what it's referencing, but I don't fully understand exactly what that's intended to do. Is it just like yet another Christian reference here to bring us back to fertility? God's fertility? I don't know. What is that sound high in the air? Murmur of maternal lamentation. Who are these hooded hordes swarming over endless plains? I almost think of like the bad guys in Avengers and Avengers Endgame, like those like things that just rush over the landscape. Ringed by the flat horizon only, what is the city over the mountains? Cracks and reforms and bursts in the violet air, falling towers. Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London, unreal. A woman drew her long black hair out tight and fiddled whisper music on those strings, and bats with baby faces in the violet light whistled and beat their wings and crawled head downward down a blackened wall. And upside down in air were towers tolling reminiscent bells that kept the hour, and voices singing out of empty cisterns and exhausted wells. It just seems like a dark landscape. It almost sounds to me like an M.C. Escher painting. You ever seen those where the stairs go upside down and sideways and everywhere? Yeah. But then there's like bats crawling on the walls, so it's like horror-like landscape, and the whole thing seems impossible, like something out of Doctor Strange with like the mirrored landscapes and things. And like something about that weirdness, there's lack of linear cohesion where it just doesn't seem to make any sense. And I think that in a world that doesn't make any sense, how do you make it make sense again? I think that's part of the lack of fertility he's talking about, is that there's so much going on that nothing actually seems to be. And we're sort of in a landscape like that right now. I mean, what is our purpose? What are we all gearing up toward? I mean, shoot, y'all are in education right now, and the whole point of education is to learn and understand more about the world and become better citizens and like have a broader context for humanity, but you all come into contact with social media so early that you feel like you already know everything by the time you get to school, and the stuff you're learning here you feel is pointless, because how is that going to help me get my job that someday I'll go to and make money and come home and then die? Fun, right? It sounds like a sort of a huge waste of time. To me, education is the only thing that is, but maybe I'm just saying that because I'm an educator. I don't know. There's so many damn things going on in the world right now, aren't there? It all seems to be on the walls, the ceiling, and everywhere. That's what he's talking about. What?
It's all waiting for us to finish the class. Then it's going to go together.
Yeah, oh yeah. That's it. Oh yeah. Oh, I gotta get to that damn video. I gotta go fast. In this decayed hole among the mountains in the faint moonlight, the grass is singing over the tumbled graves about the chapel. There is the empty chapel, only the wind's home. It has no windows, and the door swings. Dry bones can harm no one. Only a cock stood on the roof tree, in a flash of lightning. Then a damp gust bringing rain. Ganga was sunken. The limp leaves waited for rain while the black clouds gathered far distant over Himavant. I think we're in India now. The jungle crouched, humped in silence, then spoke the thunder. So now new country. Now we're like completely new area. And what do we got here? What is this data, damya? What is all that? Well, it says here that data, dayadvam, and damyata, which mean give, sympathize, and control, come from the fable of the meaning of the thunder in the Brihadaranyaka. I don't know how to say it. Brihadaranyaka. There we go. Brihadaranyaka from the Upanishad. So basically, it's the old Indian fable, the three great disciplines. The creator god Prajapati utters the enigmatic symbol Da to three groups: to humans, to demons, and to demigods. The lesser gods, who are naturally unruly, hear Da and they think, oh, it's supposed to be Damyata, which means control yourselves. And the humans, who are naturally greedy, hear Da and they say, oh, he's saying Data, we need to be more giving, we need to give. And then the demons, who are naturally cruel, hear Da and they think, oh, he means Da Yadvam, be compassionate, which we are not. So the Da is meant to be spoken to these groups who all interpret it in their own way differently, which sounds a lot like this poem, doesn't it? Where we hear a bunch of different images and we're all supposed to take out of it what we're supposed to take out of it. What is it we are meant to hear? What is it we are meant to find that's most important in it? And so it says first, data. So it's like that's the one that is give. So we need to be giving. So it says, what have we given? My friend, blood shaking my heart, the awful daring of a moment's surrender, which an age of prudence can never retract by this and this only. We've existed, which is not to be found in our obituaries or in memories draped by the beneficent spider or under seals broken by the lean solicitor in our empty rooms. I don't even know what that has to do with giving. Giving our lives to those who we lay down our lives for? Is it talking about a soldier? Is it? I don't know. Like, what do we give of ourselves? Give, like be less reserved? I don't know. Dayadvam. So that's the one that is be compassionate. So that's the one talking to the demons. And it says, I have heard the key turn in the door once and turn once only. We think of the key, each in his prison thinking of the key. Each confirms a prison only at nightfall. Ethereal rumors revive for a moment a broken Coriolanus. Every one of us thinks of the key, don't we, in our prison? So let's say that you're in the prison of your own life. Later you'll be an adult, and if you're responsible enough not to play the lottery, you won't play the lottery. But if you're in the prison of your life, which involves you not having enough money, and if only you had enough money, things would be better, you think, oh, okay, well, if I just win the lottery, here's what my mansion would look like, and here's what all the things I would do with it. But none of you play the lottery, but we still think about the key, do we not? We think, how do I escape what I need to escape? We all think about what's our key. We think about how to turn the key, but none of us actually have the key. We just think of the key. And we have damyata. So that's the one that's control yourselves. Okay. So he's talked about a lack of control this whole time, like with the weird sex, the sad sex. The boat responded gaily to the hand expert with sail and oar. The sea was calm. Your heart would have responded gaily when invited, beating obedient to controlling hands. I sat upon the shore fishing with the arid plain behind me. Shall I at least set my lands in order? He makes it sound like the world is actually, are we going to get fertility back? It doesn't seem like it as of this moment. He's sitting on the shore fishing, but is he going to catch anything? The London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. Child's rhyme, let's throw that in there for some reason. Pois escos nefoco sheglia fina. Quando fiam sil shelidan o swallow. Le prince diaketan a la tour aboli. These fragments I have shored against my ruins. Wadinel Fitchi, Hieronymo's mad again. Data, dayadvam, damyata. Shanti. What is that? It's a bunch of crap. And I always read this little bit at the end. So the falling down is of course the kid's nursery rhyme. This next part, the French part, says, he hid himself in the fire that refines them. And then it says, when shall I be as the swallow, O swallow, swallow? The Prince of Aquitaine in the ruined tower was one of the cards from earlier, from the tarot thing. These fragments I've shored against my ruins, well, then I'll fit you, Hieronymo's mad again, from some play. Then we have the give. He's telling us what to do, essentially. Give, be compassionate, control yourselves. And then it's like a prayer for hopefully this works. Shanti. The peace that passes understanding. Maybe. Will it work? I don't know. Now, my personal opinions on what this has done. I think it's brilliant. The problem is sometimes anything brilliant gets in. Huh?
I said you don't know why.
No, sort of. I think the problem is that other people don't know why. And when I say other people, I mean like those who sort of decide what makes great art. They get that this is brilliant, but the people who I guess become poets now don't understand what about this makes it brilliant. And I think as a result, they've mistaken the direction poetry should go as a result of this. I think this is like, let's say that poetry is a mountain, right? And let's say that everybody's trying to climb the mountain to create the greatest poem. The one who's probably crawled up the furthest, the best so far, we've got Homer is up there, and he's like pretty high up the mountain. We've got Dante's pretty far up there. Shakespeare's pretty far up there. And they're up there like going, man, we've made it pretty far. But then there's people like Eliot who went, look at that mountain. And he sees a mountain next to his mountain. And he goes down the mountain and he says, I can quit crawling up this mountain. I want to go over this other mountain. And Eliot understands the mountain very quickly. He sees exactly what should be done, and he climbs it and gets to the top. The problem is everybody since seems to have forgotten the main mountain, the one that really nobody's managed to climb yet. And they're all saying, yeah, let's go to this other little mountain, not realizing that mountain doesn't even matter. They're like, okay, somebody's already beaten that mountain. There's no reason to even go back. Like, that mountain's been accomplished. And I think that was Eliot's mountain. Eliot and Joyce got to the tippy top, and there's no reason anybody else should even mess with it. Like, that was the poetry of a time. And I think that time is gone. And I think that they should stop trying. The problem is it seems like everybody's been trying to climb that same mountain ever since. And everybody's forgotten about the main mountain that actually has good shit. So we just have like a bunch of crap. Like, I want to show you. This is weird. I made a video. Look, I made a video. We're going to watch it, okay? Jesse, flip the light switches off, the two on the left. Why did I say Jesse? Why did I say Jesse? Jess. That's not even your name, is it? It's like literally on the thing is Jess on the.
His name is Jessica.
Nah, his real name's Jessica.
We're done talking. Let's see. Do I even have sound going? I don't know. There we go. What did that mean? What did it mean? I literally just went through my videos folder and put a whole bunch of crap together. Like, that's all I did. I put a whole bunch of, and I was like one of the, y'all were like, what was that? Like, where the lady was listening to the heart of a guy?
Oh, that was the transplant, right? She was listening to her son.
Yeah, it was her son's heart in this guy, and she was listening to his heart and her. And I like a lot of like some of the advertisement. I tried to take out like some of the advertisement stuff that was in there, and like I just was like, oh, I like this video. Let's put part of this in here. And then I was like, it'd be funny if I took out the rest of the Ozymandias poem and put in the Nightingale. Like, why? I don't know.
The Lion King got me.
The Lion King. I thought about taking out the part that said Lion King in 5 seconds, but then I was like, it wouldn't make, I don't know. I should have just done like the Lion King part. Oh, and I hope that there was one time when I did intentionally pair something together, which is when the Osborne girl, Kelly Osborne, said the thing about Latinos.
Oh.
I made sure and put the what you have just said as one of the most idiotic things right after that, so it was very clear that I, of course, think she's stupid. Did she not realize what she said when she said it? She goes, who's going to clean your toilets, Donald Trump? No, I mean, like, in the sense that there are literally 2 Hispanic women at that table with her. Like, I was like, you're, like, such an idiot. But, like, I remembered I saw that clip and I went, oh, this is very uncomfortable. Throw that in. Like, just throw a whole bunch of stuff in there. So I literally just went through my videos folder and threw a bunch of crap in, and then just like put it all together and I cut out a whole bunch of stuff to make it not make any sense. Weirdly, this, like, there was one, yeah, it doesn't matter. But I think that that's sort of how people are writing poetry these days. Every time I read like poems, like when I read like poems from the New Yorker, you know, which you would think would put out like decent poetry that people are wanting to publish, it all reads just like that crap. Or just a bunch of lines put next to each other that don't seem to add up to anything. And they're like, art. So while I think that The Wastelands is a good poem itself, I think the effects that it's had on poetry have been horrible. Because I think everybody thinks, oh, okay, I don't get what makes The Wasteland good, but I'll make copies of what I think is like The Wasteland and say, okay, well, now I've written something that's good. But it's in trying to make art more accessible to everybody. See, here's the problem. Here's what should have happened with art. Instead of, here, we'll use one of these birthday markers. Birthday markers. Yes, you did. It's got a little marker on the bottom. Oh, turn the light back on. It's going to make the video crawl really slowly. For some, I don't know why, but like digital video goes real slow when the lights are off. So as time has gone on, let's say that we had like here we have Milton, so like in terms of difficulty of like literature, and then it goes to like Shakespeare-ish, and then we have like it comes down to like the Romantics in terms of like the language difficulty and the references, and then it goes down to like we have like Eliot who writes stuff that normal people can understand. Like we can understand the words even if what it says doesn't make any sense, right? Right? So I think what should have and I think what this is probably what's been a result of this is you have a more literate class. So you have more people who are literate. So you used to have a very few people who could read what was up here, but the rest of people were really far down here. They couldn't read at all. So like we had a whole lot of people who would like kind of stay along with this line, but then we had all these other people who were suddenly becoming literate and they want to read too. So this is sort of what's happened is you've had this convergence of like the highly literate people coming down and like the not so literate people are coming up. And that's sort of what's happening is we've lowered language to meet. And now what's happening is instead it feels like the people who finally become literate are like, we don't want to be literate anymore. We want to like every LOL. And poetry has just sort of gone down along with it. And like, I don't know, it's just like the standards of everything, like class, like high schools where like it's so important that we get everybody to pass that the teachers are just passing you. Even if you don't do anything. I'm sure you know some students who aren't doing anything and it's a pass. But it's like, what should have happened instead, because it's a lot easier to lower the standards for something than it is to raise everyone else up to a standard. What should have happened is that language stay elevated, at least to the point of the Romantics, where it just stayed there and never went down further so that people could access it. Instead, we should have worked hard to bring the lower classes up to the levels of understanding where everybody is able to understand at this high level. What we have now instead is we have these people who are like, that's not good art, and like these people don't know anything about art because art has been lowered to their standards instead of being brought up there. And they're like, well, I'm smart enough to know that vaccines are useless, that climate change won't harm us, and these people think that they're smart and they don't know anything. Where we should have had people back up here where we're like, people should learn science and they should care and they should learn literature and they should care. But instead we have, well, whatever gets me to my job that'll help me ruin the environment faster. It's just the weirdest thing. Like it's like we should have raised the expectations for society and like done something to help people get there. Instead we lowered the expectations for art because we're not going to help people get any higher than there. Does that make any sense?
I guess, yes.
Granted, none of that's going to be like on the quiz or anything. So when we have proof rock, it's mainly the same stuff I talked about with proof rock before. I think one of the more interesting ways that we have art could go in the future from here is at this website. So this is a website where you may encounter a poem that is either written by a computer or a human. And you have to try to figure out whether it's a human or a computer that wrote it. And then you guess. So here's the poem, and it looks like it's titled Another Version. Our trees are aspens, but people mistake them for birches. They think of us as characters in a Russian novel, Kitty and Levin living contentedly in the country. I think it's a human so far, but we'll see. Our friends from the city watch the birds and rabbits feeding together on top of the deep white snow. We have Russian winters in Illinois, but no sleigh bells, possums instead of wolves, no trusted servants to do our work. As in a Russian play, an old man lives in our house. He is my father. He lets go of life in such slow motion year after year that the grief is stuck inside me, a poisoned apple that won't go up or down. But like the three sisters, we rarely speak of what keeps us awake at night. Like them, we complain about things that don't really matter and talk of our pleasures and of the future. We tell each other the willows and early this year, hazy with green. Are early this year, hazy with green. I think it's a human. What do you guys think? Well, I'm going to say human. We're going to test me. By Lysel Mueller. So it's a person. Yeah, that's the person's name. So 31% say bot. So don't worry if you said bot. You're in a group. What about this one? Lives revitalize. Past lives revitalize. We were blinded, though. Felt the waves. We were blinded, though. Felt the sun on cold winter day, relevant and without roles. Thespians without roles. And without a heartbeat, without roles. Thespians without roles, not bounded nor limited.
Hopefully a robot.
I feel like the humans. Human being involved.
I'm not 100% certain here. It's bad if it is a human. But it could be a human. That's the problem we've run into, is that people don't really understand what makes...
Do eeny, meeny, miny, moe.
No, I'm not doing that. I'm gonna select bot.
That's how I do it.
It says generated by Ray Kurzweil and Dave Gitomer using Ray Kurzweil's cybernetic poet, so it is fake. 53% say bot, 47% though say not. Like almost half say it's a person. Was this poem written? Halls grow darker. Halls grew darker and somehow faded, grates of windows drowned in black. Every night, every beautiful lady knew the tiding, the queen's deadly sick. And the king, very silent and frowned past the doors, lost of pages and slaves. Every word that by chance cast around proved the truth of the closing grave. That's a human. Alexander Alexandrovich Bloch. I didn't have to finish it. I knew it was a human.
Aren't you with the literature?
Well, there are certain markers I've come to figure out make something. If something has especially a good rhythm to it, I don't know why robots can't figure out rhythm. I guess because they don't know the cadences of human speech. So I saw that every night, every beautiful lady knew the tiding, the queen's deadly sick. And once I got to every word that by chance cast around proved the truth of the closing grave, there's a dun 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 dun. I'm just reading. I should be a rap reader. I read rap and be like, yep, that's rap. So I knew that was a human before. But a lot of people say that that's not. Sometimes I get them wrong, though. The saxophone player, the shorter it is, the less chance I have of getting it right. The saxophone player lives alone. Blows. Lives alone. Blows. A swinging door. Splendid silence. Prophetic poses. Splendid silence. Prophetic poses of a prayer in the walls.
It's gotta be a bot. Bot repeats. Maybe.
Not necessarily.
Saxophone player.
I'm going to say it's a bot, but it's probably a human, but I just don't want it to be. Good, it was generated by the poet thing. Okay, see if I can do 5 in a row.
Oh, 50-50.
Oh, crap, I hate this crap.
What is this?
Okay, so this one's called re. Here, there, here and there, I say here. I do not say now, I do not say it now. Then and there, I say there, say there. I do not say then, I do not say then this. Then I say here and there. First here, I said here second. I do not talk first, there then, here goes. I do not say what goes, I do not go on saying. There is, that is not to say. I do not say that, here below. I do not talk down under my words, under discussion. All there, I do not say all I say. I'm going to say bot. Nah, it's a person. See, this is the problem that we run into. Okay, so I think that what we have to do is, I think when you look at this poem, oh no, I said we would go longer because it took me a while to get started because of the vibrations. But I think that the problem with the Wasteland has caused is that its modular construction that seems not to have a purpose, people think that that makes poetry. And that used to, like if we were talking like the 17th century, if we were talking like the time of Wordsworth and Coleridge, this would be easy, you know, because nobody would be writing poetry except the good stuff. Nobody writing poetry except that it sounded like it came from a human. Robots can't write that kind of poetry. They can't write rhythm. They can't write narrative construction. They can't write feeling. What they can do is a bunch of images placed next to each other that seem like they have meaning. Y'all ever heard of InspireRobot?
Yeah.
If you go to InspireRobot, it will generate for you an inspiring pic. You know, like the posters people put on walls?
Oh, yeah.
You know? So it looks like a poster you put on your wall. adolescence can be like being lost in the wilderness.
Oh, wow.
It was the image, the font, everything was generated by a computer.
That just makes us feel bad because you're.
Sometimes it works nicely. So like this one sounds like something that could be legit, right? Other times though, it's not. Pisces, February 19th to March 20th, fabulous spouse, sadistic spouse. Man walking on a salt flat. It doesn't make any sense.
Fancy.
But it always looks like it's something real. Socializing is overrated. You know why. And people are like, well, that's very like poignant, but it doesn't. It's not poignant. It's a computer making it. Poignant means pointed, like it like has a meaning. Like, I think it's funny though.
I swear, like this whole class, like it just feels like I've been hit over the head with like a hammer.
Those who are able to use prostitution are able to repeat fat.
Oh, yeah.
See, some of them make no sense at all. And then we'll do the fifth one as the last one. So I think that the problem is the fact that you are a woman doesn't necessarily mean that you're not educated.
Oh.
Yeah, that's for you.
See, you can't blame the computer because it doesn't have a thought and it doesn't realize what it just says. But I think that the point is that I think the wasteland has driven us in the wrong direction for poetry, and we've got to go back to where human is easier to figure out than robot. I think. These like soundbite things make it hard to figure out who says what. And I think that's one of the reasons that the election was able to be so easily swayed in the way that it was, because those Russian bots, they produce, fake stuff and send it to certain people. They do it regularly.
One more for the road.
Huh?
One more for the road.
Sure, if you want to. Watch it have a curse word in it.
Frick. That'll just be insane.
He says he'll do it. News channels are not created to regulate wealth.
What? What is that? That's.
Maybe. It's not supposed to mean anything. It's just a computer. It's not saying anything of substance.
I mean,
You have a good one. I might check the quiz to make sure that it actually has relevant questions, because it changes from semester to semester.
what does this mean?
Did y'all like my nonsensical video?
Very inspirational.
I literally just put stuff together. It wasn't supposed to be super inspirational.
I was trying to figure out what it was.
Meant nothing. Remember.